Sir, you don't belong in first class. The sentence didn't land softly. It cut through the cabin like a blade, sharp enough to turn heads, quiet enough to pretend it wasn't meant to wound, but loud enough that everyone heard it anyway. Marcus Reynolds didn't look up right away. He was seated in 2A, one leg crossed over the other, hands resting calmly on his lap, like a man waiting for a meeting to begin, not a confrontation. Around him, the first-class cabin carried that familiar stillness, low voices, the faint clink of glassware, the hum of conditioned air, but now it shifted, charged, like something invisible had just entered the room. The flight attendant stood beside him, posture tight, smile gone, eyes scanning him not as a passenger, but as a problem. I'm going to need you to move to economy, she added, her tone flattening into policy. Marcus slowly lifted his gaze, not rushed, not defensive, just present. I believe this is my seat, he said, voice even, controlled, the kind of calm that doesn't ask for permission. She didn't check his boarding pass, didn't glance at the screen, just shook her head slightly, already dismissing him. That seat has been reassigned. A pause, a beat too long, and then movement behind her. A well-dressed couple, tailored coats, polished luggage, the kind of presence that signaled acceptance without question, stepped forward. The man gave a small nod, like this was already settled. The woman smiled faintly, not at Marcus, but past him. We were told 2A was available, she said. Marcus didn't move. Not an inch. Not a breath wasted. He simply looked at the boarding pass in his hand, then back at the attendant. Run it again, he said quietly. The attendant exhaled, sharp. Sir, I'm not going to argue with you. We have protocols. That word, protocols, hung in the air like a shield, like it explained everything without saying anything at all. A few rows back, someone shifted. A phone lifted slightly, then lowered. Another passenger leaned closer, whispering something that didn't stay a whisper for long. The cabin was watching now. Not loudly, not openly, but watching. Marcus leaned back in his seat, slow, deliberate, as if anchoring himself deeper into it. I'm not arguing, he said. I'm asking you to verify. The attendant's jaw tightened. And I'm telling you this seat isn't yours. There it was. Not uncertainty, not confusion. Certainty. The kind that didn't need evidence. The kind that decided first, then justified later. Marcus let the silence stretch. Not uncomfortable. Intentional. He glanced briefly toward the cockpit, then down the aisle, then back at her. Measuring. Not reacting. Around him, the energy shifted again. Subtle. A current beneath the surface. The couple behind her exchanged a look. The man adjusted his cuff like he was waiting for this to be resolved. The woman avoided eye contact entirely. Marcus tapped the edge of his boarding pass once against his knee. A small sound. But in the quiet, it carried. You're making a mistake, he said, not louder, not sharper, just clearer. The attendant gave a short laugh, the kind that wasn't humor. No, sir, she replied. You are. And for the first time, Marcus smiled. Not wide, not friendly, just enough to suggest something she couldn't see yet. Something the room couldn't name yet. Something already in motion. Marcus did not reach for anything else, did not raise his voice, did not shift in his seat again. He simply sat there as if the outcome had already been decided somewhere far beyond this narrow cabin. As if this moment was not the beginning of something but the confirmation of it. The attendant's patience was thinning now, visible in the way her shoulders tightened and her smile disappeared completely. Sir, I am going to ask you one last time, she said, each word pressed flat, controlled, rehearsed. Please stand up and move to economy. Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying her, not with anger but with recognition, like he had seen this scene play out before in different rooms, different cities, different years. And I am going to ask you one more time, he replied, just as calm. Verify the seat. That word verify seemed to irritate her more than refusal ever could, because it demanded process. It demanded fairness. And fairness slowed things down. Behind her, the man waiting for the seat exhaled loudly, glancing at his watch like his time mattered more than the truth unfolding in front of him. Is this really necessary? He muttered, not to Marcus, but to the room itself, as if the inconvenience was the real issue. The woman beside him leaned closer and whispered something under her breath, a soft laugh following, subtle but sharp enough to land. Marcus heard it. He did not react. 2 rows back, A young woman in a gray hoodie shifted in her seat, eyes moving between Marcus and the attendant. She had seen the boarding pass earlier when he walked in. She had seen the green skin flash. She knew something was off, but she said nothing yet, her fingers tightening slightly around her phone. The attendant reached toward Marcus's arm, not aggressively, but with the kind of authority that assumed compliance. Marcus moved his arm just enough to break contact, not abruptly, not forcefully, just enough to draw a line that did not need to be explained. The air changed again. Not louder, just heavier. "Do not touch me," he said, still seated, still composed. His voice low, but carrying through the space with a clarity that silenced the small murmurs building in the background. The attendant straightened, now visibly frustrated. "You are refusing a direct instruction from crew," she said, her tone rising slightly, no longer polished. "This can delay the entire flight." Marcus nodded once, as if acknowledging the statement without accepting its weight. "Then maybe the delay is worth understanding why you are removing a confirmed passenger from his assigned seat," he replied. That sentence did not sound like a defense. It sounded like a record being created. From the aisle, another crew member approached, a taller man with a badge clipped neatly to his jacket, his presence carrying the quiet authority of someone used to stepping into tense situations. He glanced at the attendant, then at Marcus, then briefly at the couple waiting behind them. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked. The attendant answered quickly, almost too quickly. "Passenger is in the wrong seat and refusing to comply." The man nodded, turning to Marcus. "Sir, we need you to cooperate so we can proceed with departure." Marcus looked up at him, steady, unreadable. "Then proceed correctly," he said. A pause followed. Longer this time. The kind of pause where something invisible starts to crack beneath the surface. The young woman in the gray hoodie finally leaned forward slightly, her voice hesitant but clear enough to be heard. "I saw his ticket scan," she said. "It was green. Silence. Immediate. Absolute. The kind that does not ask for attention but takes it anyway." The attendant blinked once, then twice, her composure flickering for just a second before she recovered. "System. Errors happen," she replied quickly. But now it sounded thinner, less certain. Marcus did not turn toward the witness. He did not acknowledge her directly, but the corner of his mouth shifted again, almost imperceptibly, because the room had changed. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Enough for the first fracture to appear. The silence did not hold for long because tension never stays quiet. When it starts to spread, it shifts, it grows, it looks for somewhere to land. And in that moment it landed on everyone watching the exchange unfold. The taller crew member straightened his posture, slightly, his voice now firmer, less polite. "Ma'am, if the scan was green, we should verify the manifest again before taking further action," he said, carefully choosing each word like he knew the room had already begun to turn against. Certainty. The attendant's eyes narrowed just for a second, not at Marcus, but at him, at the suggestion itself, at the idea that protocol might not be on her side. "We already handled it," she replied quickly, too quickly. "There is no record of him in first class." Marcus leaned forward, just slightly, elbows resting on his knees, not in surrender, but in presence, like he was stepping deeper into the moment instead of away from it. "Then check again," he said, and this time there was something different in his tone, not louder, not sharper, just heavier, like the weight of what he knew had begun to surface. The man hesitated, his hand hovering near the tablet clipped to his side for a fraction of a second too long, before he pulled it free. The screen lit up, casting a faint glow against his face. As he began scrolling through the passenger list, the cabin watched, now openly, no longer pretending to be absorbed in magazines or quiet conversations. Phones appeared again, not hidden this time, but steady, held at chest level, recording not just the moment, but the shift. Marcus sat back again, his gaze steady on the man with the tablet, not pressing, not rushing, just waiting. The couple behind the attendant shifted uneasily, now the man clearing his throat, the confidence from earlier slipping slightly, as uncertainty replaced assumption. "Is this going to delay us much longer?" he asked, his voice no longer as assured as before. No one answered him, not immediately, because something else had taken priority. Truth had entered the room, and it was not easy to ignore. The man with the tablet frowned, his thumb pausing mid-scroll, then moving back, then forward again, his expression tightening, as if the information in front of him refused to match the narrative he had been given. "Hold on," he muttered, almost to himself. The attendant stepped closer, lowering her voice, but not enough to keep it private. "What are you doing? We do not have time for this," she said, but now there was a crack in it. "Not. Fear not yet, but pressure the kind that builds when control starts to slip. I am checking," he replied quietly, still focused on the screen. Then he stopped completely, his eyes locking onto something. There's something that should have been obvious from the start, something that changed everything. Without a single word spoken, Marcus watched him closely, not smiling, not reacting, just observing like a man who had seen this exact moment before, the moment where denial meets data, where assumption collides with fact, and the outcome is no longer negotiable. The man looked up slowly, first at Marcus, then at the attendant, and in that brief exchange something passed between them, something unspoken, but unmistakable, doubt, the kind that does not disappear once it arrives. "There is a Marcus Reynolds listed for seat 2A, he said finally, and the words did not echo loudly, but they landed with more force than anything that had been said so far. The attendant froze, not dramatically, just enough for the room to notice her stillness. The couple behind her said nothing now, the woman's smile gone entirely, replaced with a tight line of discomfort. The young woman in the gray hoodie exhaled softly, like she had been holding her breath this whole time. Marcus nodded, once not in victory, not in satisfaction, just acknowledgement, as if the truth had simply arrived on schedule. The man with the tablet continued scrolling, his brow furrowing deeper. "And it shows confirmed priority clearance," he added, and that word priority seemed to shift the room again, this time not with tension, but with realization something was off, not just slightly, but fundamentally. The attendant shook her head almost instinctively. "That has to be a glitch," she said, but now her voice no longer carried authority, it carried resistance, the kind that comes after certainty has already been broken. Marcus leaned back once more, his hands returning to his lap, his posture unchanged, his presence steady. But now there was no question left in the air, only consequences waiting to unfold, and somewhere beyond the cabin, beyond the closed door of the cockpit, something else had already started moving toward them, unseen, but inevitable. The word priority did not fade, it lingered in the air like a signal that something larger had just entered the room. Something none of them had accounted for. The attendant stepped back half a step, almost instinctively, her confidence no longer leading her movements but reacting to them. "That does not change anything," she said quickly, her voice sharper now, like she was trying to rebuild control before it slipped completely. "We still have procedures, and I am following them." But even as she spoke, the words felt thinner, less grounded. The man with the tablet did not respond right away, his eyes still fixed on the screen, like he was searching for something else, something deeper beneath the surface. "There is more here," he said quietly, almost to himself, his thumb tapping once, then again, opening another layer, another page. And as he read, his posture shifted, not dramatically, but enough for Marcus to notice, enough for the room to feel the difference. The young woman in the gray hoodie leaned forward again, this time not hesitant, but certain. "I told you it was valid," she said, her voice steadier, now no longer asking to be heard, but stating what she knew. The couple behind the attendant said nothing at all now, their earlier confidence replaced with stillness. The man adjusted his jacket again, but this time it was not about appearance, it was about discomfort, about wanting to step out of something that was no longer in their control. Marcus remained exactly where he was, his stillness now louder than anything else in the cabin. He did not rush the moment, he did not fill the silence, he let it expand, because he understood something they did not yet, that the truth did not need volume, it needed time. The attendant crossed her arms, a subtle shift, but one that spoke clearly. She was no longer guiding the situation, she was defending her position. "Sir, if you would just cooperate, we can resolve this quickly," she said, turning back to Marcus, trying to redirect the narrative, trying to shrink the moment back into something manageable. Marcus looked at her for a long second, not confrontational, not emotional, just clear. "It is already resolving," he said, and there was something in that sentence that made the man with the tablet look up again, this time directly at Marcus, not as a passenger, not as a problem, but as someone who might know more than he was saying. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, and for the first time there was no authority in his voice, only curiosity. Marcus did not answer immediately. Instead, he glanced briefly toward the front of the aircraft, toward the closed cockpit door, then back to the man with the tablet. "How long have you been working this route?" he asked, the question unexpected, out of place, but intentional. The man blinked, caught off guard. "About 8 years, he replied slowly. Marcus nodded once. "Then you know how quickly information travels once the right people are involved," he said, and now the room shifted again, not with tension, not with doubt, but with anticipation. Something was moving, something unseen, But approaching fast, the attendant shook her head again, but this time it felt less like certainty and more like resistance. "We are not waiting on anything," she said, but even she did not sound convinced. The intercom above them clicked softly, a small sound almost lost in the hum of the cabin, but it was enough. Every head turned slightly instinctively. The pilot's voice did not come through, not yet, just silence on the other end, like someone had pressed the button and then stopped. The man with the tablet looked down at his device again, and then back up, his expression tightening. "There is an internal flag on this passenger profile," he said, and the words seemed to settle heavily into the space around them. The attendant's eyes widened just slightly. "What kind of flag?" she asked, and now there was something new in her voice, not control, not irritation, but concern. The man hesitated just for a second before answering. "Executive-level clearance," he said quietly, and this time the silence that followed was different. It was no longer uncertain. It was shifting into something else, something irreversible. Marcus exhaled, slowly, not relief, not tension, just timing, as if a clock had reached exactly where it was supposed to be, and somewhere beyond the cabin, beyond the eyes watching and the voices questioning, a decision had already been made. Executive-level clearance did not sound like a mistake, it sounded like a warning, and for the first time the attendant's posture shifted from resistance to uncertainty. Her arms loosened slightly, her eyes flicking between Marcus and the man holding the tablet, as if trying to recalculate everything she thought she knew. "That still does not explain why he is sitting here without proper reassignment," she said, but now the sentence felt forced, like it was built to hold ground that was already slipping. The man with the tablet shook his head slowly, not dismissing her, but no longer supporting her either. "It explains more than you think," he replied, his voice lower, now more careful, because whatever he was seeing was no longer routine. Marcus remained still, but something behind his eyes moved, something older, something that had been here before. Not this exact cabin, not this exact flight, but this moment, this pattern, this assumption. And for a brief second his gaze drifted past the aisle, past the watching passengers, and into memory. 20 years earlier, a smaller office, fluorescent lights humming above, a young Marcus standing in a pressed shirt, holding a resume. He had spent nights perfecting. The manager behind the desk had barely looked at it. "You are not the right fit for the image we are building," the words had been polite, clean, even professional, but the meaning had been unmistakable. Not the image. He remembered standing there longer than necessary, not because he needed the job, but because he needed to understand how something so clear could be ignored so easily. And now, years later, billions of dollars later, here it was again, different uniforms, same judgment, same quiet dismissal. The memory faded as quickly as it came. Marcus blinked once, returning fully to the present. His voice, when it came, was calm, but there was weight behind it now, something anchored in experience, not emotion. "You did not verify before you acted," he said, looking directly at the attendant, not accusing, just stating. "And now you are trying to correct the outcome instead of the process." The words landed differently than anything before, because they did not defend, they exposed. The attendant opened her mouth, then closed it again, her next response delayed by the realization that the room was no longer on her side. The young woman in the gray hoodie spoke again, this time louder, not hesitant at all. "He showed you the ticket, you ignored it," she said, and now others shifted in agreement, a quiet ripple of voices, not loud, but aligned. The couple behind the attendant stepped back, slightly, creating space that had not existed before. The man with the tablet straightened fully now, his earlier hesitation replaced with clarity. "We need to pause boarding," he said, and the sentence hit harder than anything else because it meant the situation was no longer contained. The attendant turned sharply. "We cannot delay this flight over one passenger," she said, but the argument sounded smaller now, less certain. The man met her gaze evenly. "It is not about one passenger anymore," he replied, and that was the moment the line was crossed, not with force, not with noise, but with recognition. The situation had moved beyond control, beyond correction. It had become something that would have consequences. Marcus leaned back, once more, his hands folding loosely together, his breathing steady, his expression unchanged. But there was something final in his stillness now, like a door had quietly closed behind them. And just then the intercom clicked again, this time followed by a voice not from the pilot, but from ground control, calm, precise, and unmistakably direct, requesting immediate hold on departure. For further verification, the cabin froze, not in confusion, but in realization something bigger had just entered the room, and it was not asking for permission. The voice from ground control did not repeat itself. It did not need to, because its presence alone had already shifted the balance of the cabin. The attendant stood frozen for half a second too long before forcing herself back into motion, her hands adjusting her uniform, like she could still organize the moment into something manageable. This must be a routine check, she said, but the words sounded hollow even to her. The man with the tablet did not respond this time, his attention fixed on a new notification flashing across his screen, his eyes narrowing as he read, and then read again, like the information refused to fit inside anything he had experienced before. "This is not routine," he said quietly, and now every word he spoke carried weight, the kind that did not ask for agreement. It demanded attention. Marcus did not move. He did not look at the screen. He did not ask questions because he already knew the pattern. He had seen the escalation before, not here, not in this exact space, but in boardrooms, in negotiations, in moments where silence was mistaken for absence until it was not. The cabin air felt different now, heavier, slower, like time itself had stretched to accommodate what was about to happen. A faint chime echoed from the front of the plane, followed by the sound of the cockpit door unlocking, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. The taller crew member glanced toward it instinctively, then back at Marcus, then at the attendant, like he was trying to decide where authority actually lived in this moment. The attendant straightened again, attempting one last time to regain control. "Everyone please remain seated. We are resolving a minor issue," she announced. But no one moved, no one looked away. The passengers were no longer passive, they were witnesses now, and they understood that something significant was unfolding. The young woman in the gray hoodie lowered her phone slightly, but did not stop recording, her eyes locked on Marcus, as if she was beginning to understand that his stillness was not hesitation, it was strategy. The couple who had been waiting for the seat stepped further back, now fully removed from the immediate space their earlier entitlement replaced with quiet distance. The man avoided eye contact entirely. The woman folded her arms tightly across her chest like she was trying to disappear from a decision she had benefited from only minutes earlier. Marcus finally shifted, not to stand, not to leave, but to adjust his posture slightly, sitting taller, his shoulders relaxed, his gaze steady on the aisle leading forward. He exhaled slowly, a measured breath, not relief, not tension, just timing, as if he had been waiting for something to arrive, and now it had. The man with the tablet spoke again, his voice lower, now almost cautious. "They are requesting full crew identification, confirmation, and command override authorization," he said, and the phrase itself seemed to echo through the cabin like a code being activated. The attendant blinked rapidly. "Override for what?" she asked, but her voice no longer held authority, it carried uncertainty. The man did not answer immediately, because he was reading something else, something new, something final. His expression shifted again, this time unmistakably serious. "For command review," he said, and that was the moment everything changed, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. The structure they had been relying on, the chain of control, the assumption of authority, it all began to realign. Marcus looked up toward the cockpit door, his expression unchanged, but his presence now undeniable. And somewhere beyond that door, beyond the cabin, beyond the visible space, decisions were already being made, decisions that would not be reversed. The intercom clicked once more, and this time, it did not hesitate. A new voice prepared to speak, and when it did, nothing in that cabin would remain the same. The intercom clicked, and this time the voice that followed did not belong to the pilot. It was sharper, more precise, stripped of any attempt to soften what was coming. "This is Operations Command. Hold all departure procedures immediately." The words landed clean and final, and for a moment no one moved, not the crew, not the passengers, not even the attendant who had spent the last several minutes trying to hold control together with procedure and tone. The cabin did not erupt, it did not question, it simply absorbed the shift, because everyone felt that authority had just entered the room from somewhere above, somewhere beyond the reach of uniforms and rehearsed responses. The man with the tablet lowered it slightly, his eyes no longer scanning, but fixed now on Marcus, as if the connection had finally become clear, not fully understood, but undeniable. The attendant's composure broke, not loudly, but subtly, her shoulders dropping, her breath catching for just a fraction of a second too long. "Why would operations intervene at this level?" she asked, but the question did not expect an answer. It revealed the one she was already beginning to understand. Marcus slowly uncrossed his legs, his movement deliberate, controlled. He did not stand, yet he did not need to. His presence had already shifted the center of the room. He looked toward the front of the cabin, then back at the attendant, and when he spoke his voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the authority beneath it. Because you escalated something you did not understand, he said. The sentence did not accuse, it concluded. The man with the tablet exhaled quietly, almost under his breath, as if the last piece of a puzzle had finally locked into place. The young woman in the gray hoodie stared at Marcus, now not with curiosity, but recognition. Something in his stillness, in the way he had never rushed, never reacted, never defended, had begun to make sense. The couple, who had stepped back earlier, said nothing at all, now completely removed from the moment, their earlier certainty erased by something they could not control. The attendant shook her head once more, but now it was not denial, it was disbelief. "Who are you?" she asked, and the question did not come with authority. It came with realization. Marcus stood, then not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to meet her at eye level, and the room seemed to tighten around that movement like everything had been waiting for it. He did not raise his voice, he did not look around the cabin, he kept his focus on her, and spoke clearly. Each word placed exactly where it needed to land. "You denied a confirmed passenger, removed him from his seat, and ignored verification on a flight that falls under my operational authority." A pause, not for effect, but for clarity. "My name is Marcus Reynolds." Another pause, just long enough for the name to register. "Chief Executive Officer." The words did not echo, they settled. And when they did, the silence that followed was absolute, the kind that does not invite response because it leaves no room. For one, the attendant stepped back instinctively, her expression shifting from resistance to something closer to shock. The man with the tablet straightened fully, now his posture aligning not with her, but with Marcus. The intercom clicked again, as if on cue, and the same voice returned, this time more direct. "Captain and crew stand by for immediate review and reassignment instructions." And just like that, the hierarchy that had governed the cabin minutes ago was no longer intact, it had been replaced. Rewritten in real time. Marcus did not move again, he did not need to. The moment had already turned, and everyone in that cabin knew it. The silence did not break all at once, it shifted slowly, like pressure releasing from a sealed room. The attendant took another step back. This time without trying to hide it, her hands no longer steady, her voice caught somewhere between response and restraint, but no words came out. Because there was nothing left to argue. The structure she had relied on was gone, replaced by something far above her reach. The man with the tablet moved first, not dramatically, but with purpose, his posture straightening fully as he turned toward Marcus. "Sir," he said, and the word carried weight, now not casual, not procedural, but aligned. The shift was immediate and visible. The authority in the cabin had realigned itself without announcement, without negotiation. The intercom clicked again, and this time the message came faster, sharper. "Flight is officially placed on operational hold. All crew stand by for immediate reassignment and review." A quiet ripple moved through the passengers, not panic, not confusion, but realization. Phones were no longer hidden, they were steady, capturing every second, because now this was not a dispute, it was a moment. The attendant looked toward the cockpit, then back at Marcus, her expression no longer defensive, no longer certain, just exposed. "I did not know," she said finally, the sentence soft, almost fragile, but Marcus did not interrupt. He let her finish, he let her hear herself, because this moment was not about correction, it was about consequence. "You did not ask," he replied, and the words were calm, but final, not raised, not sharpened, just placed exactly where they needed to land. The couple who had once stepped forward for the seat stood completely still now, the man's earlier confidence gone entirely, his gaze fixed on the floor, the woman's arms slowly lowered, as if even holding tension felt misplaced in this new reality. The young woman in the gray hoodie lowered her phone slightly, her eyes wide, not in shock, but in understanding. She had witnessed the exact moment. Power shifted without force, without volume, just truth allowed to surface. The cockpit door opened, and the captain stepped out, his expression tight, controlled, but unmistakably aware. He looked at Marcus once, then at the crew, then back again. "We have received directive from operations," he said, carefully choosing each word like he knew the weight of them. "We are suspending this crew pending review." The words landed heavy, not because of how loud they were, but because of what they meant. The attendant closed her eyes briefly, just a second, just enough to register what had already happened. The man with the tablet stepped aside, instinctively creating space not for authority, but for transition. Marcus remained where he was standing, centered, calm, unchanged by the shift around him. Because he had never lost control of the moment, he had allowed it to reveal itself. The captain continued, his voice steadier now, but still careful. Replacement crew is being dispatched. We will not proceed until full compliance is confirmed. The phrase full compliance echoed through the cabin like a final line drawn not just for this flight, but for everything that had led to it. Marcus glanced once down the aisle, then back toward the front, his expression neutral, his breathing steady. He did not celebrate, he did not react, because this was never about winning, it was about setting a boundary. The attendant looked at him again, one last time, not for permission, not for argument, but for understanding, and what she saw was not anger, not satisfaction, but something far more final, standard. And in that moment she understood it was never about the seat, it was about the line she had crossed without realizing who she was crossing it with. And now the entire system had responded accordingly. The cabin did not return to normal, it settled into something quieter, something more deliberate, like every person present had just witnessed a line being drawn that could not be unseen. The replacement crew began to arrive one by one, their movements efficient, composed, no hesitation, no confusion, because they had already been briefed. The transition happened without noise, without spectacle. Uniforms changed positions, instructions were followed, and within minutes the structure of the flight had been rebuilt around a new standard. The former crew stood to the side, not dismissed loudly, not removed with force, just displaced by consequence. The attendant, who had first spoken, now stood near the aisle, her posture no longer rigid, no longer defensive, just still, her eyes lowered for a moment before lifting again toward Marcus, not searching for forgiveness, not expecting a response, just understanding what had already been decided. Marcus returned to his seat, slowly, the same seat. He had never truly left, his movements measured, as if nothing about the moment required urgency, because for him it never had. He adjusted his jacket, slightly rested his hands once again on his lap, and looked forward the same way he had at the beginning, calm, grounded, unchanged. The young woman in the gray hoodie exhaled a soft breath. She had not realized she had been holding her phone, now lowered completely, her expression no longer uncertain, but certain in a different way, the kind that comes from seeing something real unfold in front of you. The couple, who had once stood ready to take the seat, quietly moved back toward their original row. No words exchanged, no acknowledgement made, just distance created where assumption had once been. The captain reappeared briefly, his voice steady, now aligned with the system that had just corrected itself. "We appreciate your patience. We will begin boarding procedures again shortly," he said, and this time no one questioned it, because the authority behind those words was no longer assumed, it was verified. The cabin lights remained steady, the hum of the aircraft returned to its familiar rhythm, but something deeper had shifted, something that did not disappear when the moment passed. Marcus glanced once out the window, the runway stretching beyond the glass, a long clear path forward, then back ahead, his expression neutral but present. The attendant took one final step back, aligning herself with the rest of the crew, no longer at the center of anything, no longer holding control, just part of a system that had been reminded what it was supposed to be. The man with the tablet, now standing beside the new crew, nodded once toward Marcus, not exaggerated, not performative, just acknowledgement between two people who understood what had just happened without needing to say it out loud. Marcus leaned back slightly, his voice, when it came, was quiet, but it carried across the space, not forced, not amplified, just clear. "I did not need to raise my voice," he said, his eyes steady forward, not looking at anyone in particular. "I just needed the truth to arrive." A pause followed, not long, but enough for the weight of the words to settle into the room. "Because respect is not something you offer when you recognize power," he continued. "It is something you give before you know who you are speaking to." The cabin remained still, not silent in discomfort, but still in recognition, the kind of stillness that comes when something has been understood at a level deeper than explanation. Marcus did not say anything else. He did not need to. The plane would take off soon. The system had corrected itself, and the moment would move forward. But what had happened in that cabin would remain, not as a story of conflict, but as a standard quietly set and unmistakably clear.